So let us pay respect first. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so we will continue to explore the Dhammapada, and this is the 8th session. So, so we have, Dhammapada means following the footsteps of Dhamma. And so we have done these many already. So last month we did follow the Dhamma. So as you all remember from last month or last session, or if you have refreshed, we do have reflections which we will share. So last month we studied that there are different definitions to the word Dhamma. Dhamma, but the most commonly used one and the most appropriate is the nature of existence of all phenomena. That is the truth pertaining to the existence of phenomena or human life, animate or inanimates. And or even a tool like this. There is a Dhamma to this tool. That means the lifespan of this gong, of this meditation gong. But and then there is another definition of Dhamma is the teachings of the Buddha. So so there are different ways to approach the Dhamma, as we have studied last time. There are 3 ways. The first way is to study the theory, study the book, or watching videos, or listening to audio talks. Those we call that pariyatti, the theory. And then after studying the theory, we start to think about it. We start to try to understand. We absorb it, and we put it into practice, and we call it patipatti. And then because through practice, we start to have this insight. Because we penetrate into the theories, we penetrate into our understanding, then through this experience, we realize what the Buddha has taught, the truth pertaining to existence, especially our own existence, and we call that experiential realization. We call that patividana. So there are 3 ways to approach the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, or the truth of existence. So we talked about that last time, about Dhamma. And we talk about following the Dhamma. So reflections on following the Dhamma, I put out last time is which part of the Dhamma. That means I really didn't put it right, but I think the best way to look at it is in all the teachings or in the Dhamma, which has the most influence on you. And then the second part is how does it influence you? And then the third part is how often can you walk the talk? That means what you have learned, can you practice it? Can you implement it? Can you integrate it into your daily life? That's walking the talk, not just talking the talk. So we are actually becoming a walkie-talkie, not talkie-talkie, okay? So walkie-talkie, how well can we become a walkie-talkie? So these are the 3 parts of I put out for reflections. So the floor is yours. So I will open up the floor for reflections. Mm. Okay, good. Thank you. Um, as you all know, we have problems with AV, so I need to screen in order to really try to catch the audio coming through the speakers. I think I can catch about 80%, but good. You talk about the pairs. Yeah, that's why the pairs are the first in the first chapter. The pairs is especially for the first verse and the first verse and the second verse are I think is the most wonderful verses in the Dhammapada. Don't try to bash yourself. Don't try to beat up yourself, Wai Fun. Okay, we are human beings. We are human beings, and as long as you try your best to continue walking the path, as long as you try your best to develop that mindfulness, don't start beating up yourself if you have made the mistake. But if you are intentionally make that mistake, if you intentionally do something and that is a mistake, then you need to beat yourself up a little bit. If you don't, then you will repeat that mistake again later on, because you are intentionally doing it. So that is the difference. Okay. Okay. Good. Anybody else? Reflections. Nora, yes.
Okay, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
I think what struck me, from years of study the Dharma is the law of karma.
Mm.
The fact that, we're responsible for what happens to us.
Yes.
And it's not just, I'm a victim or, just
Yes.
get over that, right? Maybe something in the past you did or whatever, but going forward,
Yeah.
that's what's important.
Yeah.
And also the precepts. I find the precepts, really help.
Mm.
Like to clarify, no stealing, and like speech. I think the part that I have the most struggle with is speech.
Who doesn't? Who doesn't?
Training and attachment, but knowing that there is a way out. And so, how often do I walk the talk? I feel like I don't put nearly as much effort in as I could, and I really should. That's it.
That's good, Nora. That's good. Thank you. Yeah. You talk about the speech is the most difficult part to keep among most of precepts. At least the 5 precepts for the householder. The speech is the noble speech is actually very, very difficult to keep. And mind you, speech is not just something that you say, something that you write out could be also considered a speech. Okay? So now people don't talk to each other much, but people keep texting, writing emails. So that is speech. That could be considered as speech. So be careful when you write emails. Can you be careful when you write text? That is also could be wholesome or unwholesome. This This is really the trickiest part of all the senses. The six senses that we have. Of course, the mental part is the big chief behind the scene. But this one is really difficult, so difficult to control. And not just controlling, so difficult to be mindful of. Coming out is so fast. But trying to hold it back is so difficult, right? So be very mindful. I want you guys, really, because I have heard so many unmindful comments, unmindful sort of orders, and unmindful conversations that could become so hurtful, that could become so destructive to human relationships. And mind you, especially in a Dhamma center, in a nunnery, in a monastery, your speech could be the seed for people to give up Dhamma. You know what I mean? Because of your speech, people will lose confidence in the Sangha. And because they lose confidence in the Sangha, that they could step back from practicing the Dhamma. So be extra vigilant in your speech. Sometimes you don't know. You really don't know. You may not think it is a hurtful speech. You might not think so, but on the other party who hear it, it hurts them. It hurts them. That's why I don't know whether you remember. I told you before, but you probably said I haven't. Remember in the old days, I kept telling you stories, and you kept saying that you haven't heard it. So, in our precepts, talking about speech is what? Soft words and consoling speech. Soft words and consoling speech. So you can see how difficult that could be. Very difficult. And, and I'm glad that Nora, you bring this up about sila. Sila helping you, but sila is really helping us to keep watching ourselves. It's a really helping us to guard this mind. And without sila that means morality, okay? So without sila, we can just do whatever we want. We can just say whatever we want. We can just walk wherever we want. I remember when we were planning for the courtyard, because the courtyard, it was like changed, the construction, the courtyard. It was changed again, over again. And I remember the architect suggested me, you should make a pathway only 4 feet wide. I said, 4 feet wide? I have 8 feet corridors inside the house, and I only have 4 feet pathway. It's not my style. I said, I would like wide pathway. He said, you know what? People have their habits. They just want to walk anywhere they want. You need to put a pathway in. I was not going to put a pathway in, a concrete pathway. He said, no. Everybody will just walk on the grass, whenever they can put the foot on, they will just walk on it. You need to put a pathway there to lead them from here to there and from there to there. Otherwise, they walk all over the place. I said, no. They said, yes. And I said, really? They said, yes. I said, okay. And I agree now. I totally agree now. And I'm glad that I agree to put in pathways rather than just grass path. So it's the habit pattern of human beings, So yeah, thank you, Nora. And sila, morality is just like pathways, guiding us, putting us back into that path and follow that path. That's the directions. Okay? Good. Fong King, you have something? Did you put your hand up? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Mm. Good. 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 Thank you. Good. So, you talk about meditation that is experiential realization, right? You experience that and then you start to understand more. You realize that I need to pay more attention in this aspect. I need to change. I need to correct myself more in here. So that is realization, and that is because you have that experience. So that's great, good. So Irene, from the Bay Area. Yes, hi. Yeah, good, good. Thank you, Irene. Thank you. Good. Well, at least you can walk more now than just talk. That's good. Let's just keep improving, right? Anybody here? Anybody from here? Laurie, yes.
As I was listening to people talk, I thought, oh yeah, definitely the precepts in early days, definitely precepts.
Yes.
But when you first brought these reflections out, the very first thing that popped in my head was impermanence.
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 Yeah.
And now that's the thing that influences me the most. The understanding, a better understanding of impermanence.
Yeah.
And how does it influence me? I realize when I'm getting attached to things, it's easier for me to let things go. I understand nothing stays the same. It's always going to change.
Yeah.
And how often can I walk that talk? Well, some days are better than others, but actually it crosses my mind every single day, sometimes multiple times a day. So it's definitely in there.
Good.
Thank you.
Good, good, good. Very good. Okay. Anybody else? No? Then, okay, we move on. So we move on to tonight. So the initial themes I put out, we've finished. So we are starting a new set of themes. So last time it was the following the Dhamma. And tonight we're talking about the supreme truth. And then there will be practicing the Dhamma and the mind, the right efforts and benefits. So there will be, including tonight, there will be 5 more themes. Oh, there are actually plenty more themes in Dhammapada, but I just pick out these 5 for the time being that I'll be talking about in the future. So tonight we're talking about the supreme truth. But when implementing the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma, that's the next month. But so the path. So last time we talked about the path being a way out of sufferings. And the whole path, it actually works around the Eightfold Noble Path. We talked about that last time. So if we would like to follow the Dhamma, we definitely have to take on this path, this particular path. If we veer off from the path, we will veer off from happiness, from peace, from freedom. So when we veer off from a path of happiness, freedom, and peace, that means we are walking into the path of sufferings, miseries, right? So in the Buddha's teachings, which was taught by the Buddha, which was, expounded by the Buddha, he said, who has to walk on the path? Who is the most important person to walk on the path? And he said, you are the one. He said, you yourselves must strive. That is in Dhammapada, verse 276. So he said, you yourselves must strive. The Tathagatas, that means the Buddhas, not Tathagata, but Tathagatas is the plural, the Buddhas. So that means not just Sakyamuni Buddha, it's all the Buddhas before him, all the Buddhas in historical Buddhas only point the way. They point the one and only one way. That's the way out of sufferings. And those who meditate, those meditative ones who tread the path are released from the bonds of Mara. And Mara not considered as a particular body that would harm you. Mara is considered as obstacles to the liberation from sufferings. Okay, anything that could lead you into sufferings are considered to be Mara. Okay, so your thought could be the Mara. If you are diabetic, a box of chocolate in front of you could be Mara, right? And why? Because craving for sweets, for sweets, and if you don't get it, you get angry. Oh, okay. Or if you have taken one, you want another one. That could be your Mara. But that will only lead to maybe physical problems. But Mara, in a greater sense, in a bigger sense, deeper sense, is stopping or pushing you to keep running in the cycles of birth and death. That means you never come out of rebirth. And remember, rebirth doesn't necessarily mean that you will be reborn as human being. Where do cows and dogs and cats and snakes come from? Come from rebirth. Okay? Where do ants come from? Come from rebirth. Right? So we could end up in animals realm. We could end up in ghost realm. You have read a book called by Gabor Mate called The Hungry Ghosts, right? Talking about the drug addicts at the East End in Vancouver. So the hungry ghost in human world We could end up as hungry ghosts. And we could end up as animals. Okay? So we could end up in hell's realm. So those are the lower realms that we could end up in. So Mara is the trick. Okay? Mara could be the causes for our rebirth in those lower realms. So you yourself must strive. You are your own master. You have to strive on and stay on this path to liberation. And what happened? What happened when you walk on this path? And that is 275. And he said, walking upon this path, you will make an end of suffering. And having discovered how to pull out the thorn of lust, I expound the path. We actually looked at these verses before. We have looked at these two verses before. So, in this verse, it says, following this path, you will make an end to dukkha, an end of suffering. That means we will be happy. Without suffering, then we will be happy, right? Suffering and happiness are two sides to a coin, right? Duality. So who told us about this path to happiness, to liberation? The Buddha. But was this created by him? No. It was there all the time, but it disappeared. So when the Buddha was born and he attained enlightenment, he rediscovered this truth. And so when he started to teach the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path, so he revived this to bring these teachings back to life. So we are lucky that we, 2,600 years later, we can still encounter the teachings of the Buddha. We are very fortunate. So how can we then be released from sufferings? By what? By understanding the supreme truth. So this supreme truth is where we look at Dhammapada. There are actually many verses. So I pick out a few verses today to look at this. And he said, before looking at this, what he talks about this supreme truth, what is the content of this supreme truth? He said, better it is to live one day seeing the supreme truth. You see how precious this supreme truth is. The Buddha said, better it is to live one day seeing the supreme truth than to live 100 years without ever seeing the supreme truth. We are so fortunate. We hear about the Dhamma all the time, and especially us being monastics. And you folks, some of you folks are so close to us, and come to Poland every day, and some of you come once in a while, but still you see this truth. But are you able to remind yourself about this truth? Are you able to appreciate the truth? That's the very important point. Okay? So, as I always say, the length of life is really not crucial. But how you use that length of life is very crucial. It's very important. And during this length of life, are you able to make full use of this length of life to start seeing the supreme truth more and more? And why? Why do we need to see this supreme truth so badly? Because by seeing this truth, we start to understand it more. And by understanding it more, we allow us to really see what governs our life and how we can turn our life around. Not turn our life around to a worse life, but to a better life. Not just this life, but future life. Okay? So, and not just for us ourselves, but you have heard from reflections or from reflections from before is not just for ourselves, because we are better and that we will have a better relationship with our families, with our friends, and because we are better, at least the world around us will be better. And if we are powerful enough, strong enough, we can spread this better to a bigger space, further on. So we can definitely, totally influence, make an influence to our families, our communities, and hopefully our society, and hopefully to the world, you know. So I want to share with you the story that is relating to this verse. Is there's this woman called Bahu. I just use Bahu because, you know, this Pali names are very long, okay? So Bahu has many children, and she when she get older, she was very, very well off. When she gets older, her children wanted her to actually divide all her inheritance. But she didn't want to. She wanted to, you know, they can have the inheritance when she dies. But the children kept on persuading her, and eventually she gave up. She divided her inheritance, and she, you know, give each children their own share. She didn't leave anything to herself. She thought, after I gave them the inheritance, they will look after me when I get old. Sadly enough, when she got old, she started living in, you know, with the sons and with the daughters, and then the first place that she went to was her oldest son. And the oldest daughter-in-law said to her, "Why do you come to our place all the time? As if that we have double your shares of inheritance." It was very hurtful, right? So she moved on to the second son, to the third daughter, and the fourth son, and so on and so on. Everybody said the same thing. So they didn't like her coming to their household. Eventually, Bahu became so disappointed. She said, "Wow, I raised these children. And when I get old, they wanted my money, they wanted my inheritance, and I gave them their shares, and they didn't want to look after me." So eventually she decided to renounce and became a nun. Then she went to the Buddha and asked for a meditative tool. So the Buddha gave her a tool, and then she meditated on it. And she meditated. And then one night, the Buddha, in his deep meditation, actually noticed that Bahu was ripened to receive the teachings and ripened to get enlightened. So Buddha, of course, used his supernatural power and sat in front of Bahu, right? And radiate his light out. And then the Buddha said to Bahu, said, "The life of one who does not practice the Dhamma taught by me is useless. even if he were to live for 100 years. So exactly this, the same words like this, but because through different translator, they use different terminology, or put them into different expression. So it's similar to this. Better it is to live one day seeing the Supreme Truth than to live 100 years without ever seeing the Supreme Truth. And Bahu, once she heard what the Buddha said, she just entered that stream of enlightenment and entered and attained the first fruit of enlightenment. So you see, we are fortunate, but yet we are not fortunate either, because the Buddha has gone into Nibbana 2,600 years ago. Okay? So we didn't have Buddha in front of us. We only had the words of his. But still, we are way much fortunate than many others. So what is that law? What is that supreme truth? What is that supreme truth? That very important points we need to see through in order to be detached and liberated. So in this supreme truth, there are three parts to it. We call them the three Dhamma seals. First is, all conditioned things are impermanent. The second is, all conditioned things are unsatisfactory. The third truth is, all things are not self. So let us find out what and how the Dhammapada expound these three truths. So the first one, all conditioned things are impermanent. Look at this flower. You all know what this is, right? Echinacea, isn't it? A pink, beautiful echinacea. But this one is withered. Once upon a time, this was a beautiful echinacea, beautiful blooming flower with vibrant colors. And does echinacea have smell? Not quite. No, huh? Yeah, but now this is withered, dry and wrinkled up. So what is this phenomenon? This phenomenon is something that Laurie talked about just now. It's impermanence. So with from 277 to 279, it shared the same story. But it encompasses 3 verses. And the first verse is, all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. This is the path to purification. So impermanence, we call it anicca, A-N-I-C-C-A. So there were 500 monks who received the meditation instruction from the Buddha. And they went into the forest to practice meditation. But they made very little progress. So they returned to the Buddha to ask for another subject of meditation, which would suit them better, so that they could practice better. So on reflection, the Buddha found these bhikkhus actually, during one time of the Kassapa Buddha, they had actually meditated on impermanence before, and so on and so forth for the next 2 verses, okay? So the Buddha actually taught them a meditative tool on impermanent and told them all conditioned things are impermanent. How many times have we heard all conditioned things are impermanent? Many times. have we got enlightened? No. Why is that? Because we still haven't seen through the truth. We only understand it on a literal level. We haven't seen it through the truth. So let us look at all conditions. Things are impermanent, anicca, it says. And this is actually a very, very important aspect of the Buddha's teachings. And we can actually start to look at it from a seed. Look at impermanence from a seed. There is this farmer. There is this seed into the soil. The farmer put the seed into the soil. And then, with the sun, with the rain, and of course with fertilizer and the right soil, the seed will sprout into, become a seedling, right? So this seedling is up. It's almost time for us farmers to start planting seeds. So seedling. When there is seedling, you still need this rain and sun and care from the farmer, from the sun, from the universe, to give the seedling all these nutrients before it will bear fruits, right? So all conditions, these are the conditions for the seed to become seedling, for the seedling to become a plant or a flower, and for the flower to bear, or the tree, apple tree, to bear fruits. Okay? So the seed is the cause for the fruits. And the fruits are the causes for the next seeds, right? So it's a cycle. And all these are the conditions for that seed to become a seedling, to bring fruits. So we just look at it, it seems to be very simple. Well, flowers, the seed, and all the conditions, they all come together, and so there will be the seed, and then there will be the flowers. It's so simple. But yet, if any of these seedlings, or any of these conditions is missing, would that seed turn into become a seedling? It won't, right? So, I have heard something like this before. Is that if you want to start scratch, you probably agree with me, Laurie. If you want to make an apple pie from scratch, you need to create a universe. A universe, right? Flour, water, sugar, apple, cinnamon. Do you put nutmeg? Whatever you want to put it. That's a whole universe of stuff. Those are the conditions. So you need a whole universe there before you can make an apple pie, or a cherry pie, or a blueberry pie, right? So everything here is necessary for that seedling to become a seedling. Anything that is missing, it won't work, right? So all conditions, things are impermanent, but all these conditions are changing all the time. Rain changes all the time. Sometimes we have rain, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have snow, sometimes we have drought. And sometimes we have sunshine, sometimes we don't. And sometimes we have a good farmer, sometimes we don't. And sometimes among thousands of seeds, some don't sprout at all. Right? So all these conditions that actually have to come together in a perfect match before this seed can start to bear fruit. Perfect match. Imperfect match, nothing works. So we have to really look at this. And nature, impermanence, everything starts to change. And if they change for good reason, then it works. If it doesn't, then it doesn't work. So when we look at this next slide, any of these conditions could just disappear. Any of these factors. If there is this seed, if the farmer is not there, the rain is not there, the sun is not there, any one of this disappear, there won't be this seedling. Even though there will be the farmer, there will be the rain, there will be the sun, but the seedling won't grow. Because all these, if one of these factors disappear, if it's not there, then it doesn't work. And all of these factors are governed by the law of impermanence. They are constantly changing. So we need to start to be aware of impermanence and appreciate our own potential. Our own potential of what? Because our own potential of realizing that this is urgent. I need to make full use of my life. I need to make full use of every moment because it is urgent, because my life could end right here. A lot of people, I have seen so many people say, okay, I can renounce when I retire. I said, yeah, if you're still alive. Or I can renounce when my children are 18 or 20, or they can become independent. And my mind said, okay, you wait and see whether you can live that long. And it's not a curse. I don't curse. And he said, maybe I will practice more when I would retire, then I'll be able to travel around the world once, and I'll come back and I'll practice more. I said, okay, I'll see you. I'll see you then, if I ever see you. It's not necessary that she died. Maybe I die first, right? Who knows? Nobody knows. Impermanence, changing all the time, changing. Don't wait. Please don't wait. There is no waiting. If you can do it, do it. Don't wait. So, why do we wait? Because we attached. We just attached. That's all. We attached to what? We attached to craving. We attach to the roots of sufferings. And craving is a very deep root. And because of craving, even though we see impermanence, but we don't think that impermanence, I will be affected by impermanence. No. It won't affect me. In the back of the mind, there is this wishful thinking. No, it won't be me. It won't be me, right? So that's why when people are diagnosed to have, maybe terminal illness, not necessarily cancer, terminal illness, why me? When people ask, why me? In the back of the mind is, I don't believe this. Why me? Why not you? Why not him? But why me? Because there's this wishful thinking is, I am invincible. I still have a long life. I could live 120, 150. because they're lacking that sense of urgency. So rationally accepting that everything is temporary is really a refreshing concept. But whether you want to believe it or not, it is up to you. If you accept this law of impermanence as a core value that you hold dear, you would try to embrace whatever that happens to your life, whether it's sweetness, whether it's bitterness. If it is sweetness, you say it's impermanent. Don't crave too much for it. If it is bitterness, that don't worry, it will pass. It's just a matter of time, right? So we each have the capacity to enjoy our life completely, as long as we understand what governs our own life. And we all have an expiry date. Okay, we all have to come down from the shelf one day. But do you know your expiry date? Nobody knows. Unless you are very, very, very deep in your meditation and you develop that supernatural power. So hopefully before we expire, we have a chance to see through that truth and come out of that wishful thinking that I'm invincible. Okay? So any of these factors can disappear. Okay? So impermanence, I always like to use a river to talk about impermanence. That's our beautiful, wonderful dog, Goldie, in the river. And the water in the river is a vivid example of displaying the law of impermanence. In the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening, you take a dip in that river, the water is always different because the water is constantly flowing. And it can be the same water. If you think it's the same water, it's your own delusion, it's your own misconception, it's your own misunderstanding. And if you think it's the same water, it is a mere dream and illusion, an unachievable wish. It will definitely be a sure disappointment. Okay? So remember, impermanent is always surrounding us, always telling us, look at your own hair. It turns gray, it turns silver. That is a message of impermanence. Okay? So, verse 46, he said, realizing that this body is like froth, penetrating its mirage-like nature, I'm plucking out Mara's flower-tipped arrows of sensuality, go beyond sight of the king of death. Verse 46. So, of course, the king of death, that means if you go beyond sight of king of death, that means you go into deathless, that means you go into nibbana. No coming, no going. But we don't look at that, this is too far for us. But realizing that this body is like froth. This whole story is about a bhikkhu. He actually, he took a subject of meditation and went into the forest, but he tried very hard on his meditation. He wasn't going anywhere. So he wanted to go back to the Jeta Grove monastery to ask the Buddhas for advice how to progress more in his meditation. But on the way back to Jetta Grove Monastery, he stopped by and he sat next to the river. And he was looking at the river, and he saw that the wave come, the wave go. And he saw this, when he was walking, he saw this mirage first. And then he came to the river, and then he saw this water bringing up that froth. And he started to contemplate, hey, my body is just like this mirage. And this river, this froth is also just like when this froth breaks up, it's just like my body breaking up. When I die, this body breaks up. It's just like that froth come up to the bank, and then the next wave brings it out back into the river, and it breaks up. It's just like our body, when we die, it breaks up. So, and he started to see that impermanence through this mirage, through this froth, and he just immersed himself into that deep meditation. And of course, eventually he attained enlightenment. But how many times when we drive on the road, how many times have we seen that mirage? We constantly see that mirage, especially in the summer, right? Oh, there's this mirage. But we did not connect that to impermanence. Next time if you see a mirage on the road, remember this story and refresh yourself on impermanence. When you get closer to the mirage, it disappears. That tells you how impermanent it is. And that is a mere illusion through our eye sense doors. And it is a condition arising. The mirage is a conditioned arising because of the amount of humidity, the amount of heat on the road, and that creates that illusion. You think that mirage is real, but how come when you drive closer it disappears? So it's not real, right? So it's a wonderful, I think it's a wonderful illustration, the mirage and the froth. So that's why it says, the Buddha said, to be released from this delusion and illusion, the body is just like froth, bubbles, foam. It disintegrates quickly. So, the Buddha said, better it is to live one day seeing the rise and fall of things than to live 100 years without ever seeing the rise and falls of things. The rise and fall, that means the impermanence. It's almost the same as the last verse that we looked at just now, but this tells you the impermanence of things. So we also is impermanent. This body is impermanent. And Patachara, a woman, very rich woman from Savatthi, and she was very beautiful and from a very rich family. And you know, in the old days, or even I think nowadays too, it still happens, is if you are very rich, you need to marry into a very rich family too. Okay? So, but she eloped with her attendant. She eloped and she left her family. And she got pregnant, and in the old days when the pregnant woman near the time of giving birth, they need to go back to the mother's house. So she was on the way back to the mother's house, and the husband saw that she wasn't home. Then he knew that she was going back to her mother's house. So he caught up with her and begged her to go back. And she said, no, I can't go back. I need to go to my mother's house. But on the way, she was ready to give birth. So the husband went to find a place and tried to make her a comfortable place so that she could give birth. And he was bitten by a snake, and then he died. Padachara gave birth to a boy. And then she thought, where was my husband? So the next morning she went to look for her husband and noticed that her husband has died. So she would return back home. She returned back home, but found out that I forgot. No, that was the first child. She went home with her husband. Her husband was not dead. But she got pregnant again, 2 pregnancies. The second pregnancy, she went home. She was going to go home again to her mother's house. The husband this time went with her. But by the time they reached to the river, she was ready to give birth. So the husband said, okay, I'll find you a comfortable place. At that time, the husband tried to find her a comfortable place, and then he was bitten by a snake and died. The next morning, she discovered her husband's body. So she sort of like roughly bury him with all these weeds and branches and all that. Then she was ready to go to her mom's place. But she had to cross the river first. She had 2 boys. One was only 1 day old. The other one was a year old. So she told the year-old, you sit there, I will walk across the river with your brother first. You wait here, I'll come back for you. She walked across the river, put the baby down on the other bank of the river, and then she walked back to fetch the 1-year-old boy. But then, on the way back, there was a hawk. Big hawk, and thought that little boy was a piece of meat or a chicken or whatever. It flew down and caught that baby and took that baby away, and Patachara, in the middle of walking back to the other bank, saw that hawk. She tried to scare that hawk away by screaming, by waving her hands. The little boy on that side thought that the mother was calling for him. So he started walking into the river. And of course, he was drowned, carried away by the river. So Patachara was devastated. She lost 2 boys. But she was still going to her mother's house. And on the way to Savatthi, where her mother's house was, she bumped into some villagers and asked, how are my parents? And the villagers told her, because of the rain, torrential rain, your mother's house was rushed, was flooded. Your parents, your brothers were all killed in the flood. So she was left alone. The whole family died. Her 2 sons, her husband, her parents, her brothers. She went crazy. She went nuts. Crying on the road to Savatthi, crying. And her sari dropped, and she was half naked, running on the roads of Savatthi, lamenting. And then the Buddha was there, and the Buddha asked her to come, but the people stopped her from coming because she was half naked, and they thought that it was too disrespectful. The Buddha said, allow her to come. So they brought her, and then they put her right next to the Buddha. And then she came to her senses and saw that she was half naked. The people threw her a piece of cloth. She wrapped herself up. And then she told the Buddha the whole story. Then the Buddha said to her, Patachara, have no fear. You have now come to one who can protect you and guide you. Throughout this round of existence, that means samsara, the amount of tears you have shed on account of the death of your sons, of your husbands, your parents, your brothers, is voluminousness. That means huge. It is even more than the waters of the 4 oceans. The tears that you have shed is more than the waters of 4 oceans. Then the Buddha taught her about the countless existence, and she felt relieved. Then the Buddha said to her, one should not think too much about those who were gone, but one should start practicing in order to purify oneself and strive to reach the other shore and be liberated. Then, of course, Patachara heard the teachings. She went into the monastic order. So the Buddha, after Patachara, the Buddha actually uttered this verse: better it is to live one day seeing the rise and fall of things than to live 100 years without ever seeing the rise and fall of things. Even you have a glimpse of moment, seeing impermanence, that could be a wonderful moment. Okay? Wow. Okay, so next one. The next one is unsatisfactory, like all dissatisfactions or sufferings or miseries, but in the Pali term it's called dukkha. So verse 278, it says, all conditioned things are unsatisfactory. When one sees this with wisdom and turns away from suffering, this is the path to purification. Because everything is changing, impermanent, nothing is fully satisfactory. Because in the back of the mind, we do want good relationship, we do want pleasant situations, we do want pleasant feelings to persist. But sorry, this is not the reality. Reality is impermanence. Reality is any situation could become dissatisfied, and it could become unpleasant. So when we start to see the truth, we start to find a way out, and that is the path to purification. So the Buddha said dukkha, that means dissatisfaction, dukkha. The best word to actually stick to is dukkha, because no English translation could actually really describe dukkha fully. So I like to use dukkha myself. So dukkha, that means dissatisfaction, misery, sufferings, all that, unpleasantness. So the dukkha, basically there are 8 types of dukkha. Birth. Why would babies cry? Dukkha, right? When the baby was born, the first thing they felt was the air is different from the mother's womb. Mother's womb inside is so warm, the outside air is so cold, and that could be very unpleasant for the babies. And then aging, we all agree with that because we have all aged, right? So aging is dukkha. But it doesn't need to be a misery. But aging could be a misery if you if you don't like it, if you dislike it, if you start to reject it. Okay? And illness is dukkha. Death definitely could become dukkha if you think that you are invincible, if you think that you won't die. Okay? And union with unpleasant, or you encounter unpleasantness, including unpleasant situation, unpleasant people, unpleasant words, unpleasantness throughout. Okay? And you separate from the pleasant. We all have this pleasant, we all attached to pleasantness. We all like to have pleasant situation, pleasant people, hearing pleasant words, and we hear unpleasant, we don't like it, right? And not getting what we want, and always getting what we don't want. That is dukkha. And the 5 defiling aggregates, that means the physical and the mental challenges that we face all the time. Actually, the last one encompasses all the 7. So dukkha, that means unpleasantness. But these are all very natural phenomena. That are natural stages that we have to go through. We don't have to dislike them. But because we don't understand, or we don't see through, we don't accept the fact that everything is changing, and so are we, and we always forget about it. So when we are hit by any of this, we turn it to become a suffering. It doesn't need to be a suffering. Aging doesn't need to be a suffering. Old age doesn't need to be a suffering, right? You see? Yeah, Thelma is enjoying her golden old age, right? And it doesn't need to be suffering. And we don't need to, as long as we accept it. So we need to learn how to accept it. So that is dukkha. Dukkha. So, and then he said everything is not self. Oh, definitely there is a self. I pinch myself, it hurts. How come there is not self? It doesn't mean that, okay? He said all things are not self. When one sees this with wisdom, one turns away from suffering. And this is the path to purification. Not self, that means nothing is ever permanent, and everything is changing, forever changing. And there is no permanent self or essence can be found in that particular phenomenon. It doesn't mean that we deny the existence of a self, okay? It's just that we call this a not self or a non-self. Let's see what does it mean by anatta. And that means not or without. Atta means self-existent essence. Okay, so what does it mean? That means everything is conditioned. So which one is you? Your hair is you? The eyes is you? The nose is you? No. Everything that comes together that makes this thing, entity, and we give it a name, Sister Jessie. But Sister Jessie is a combination of all these together. And Sister Jessie has this particular nose, particular color of hair, particular color of eyes. If that color of eyes is different, that is totally not Sister Jessie anymore. Right? So I want to use one of my favorite to illustrate this anatta to you. My favorite car, Beetle. Okay, so what is the Beetle? Beetle, Volkswagen car. Is this a real Volkswagen car? No, we give this a name. Is the body the car? Or are the wheels the car? Or the steering wheel? Or the batteries? Or the fuel tank? Or the speedometer? Which one we can call it a car? We can't call any of this a car. We don't call any of this a car. But we call the combination of all these a car for convenience. But these are all conditions that come together, favorable conditions come together in the favorable conditions. If any of these are broken, it's not favorable, and it won't make a Volkswagen Beetle workable, right? It can't. So which one is really a Volkswagen Beetle? Which one of this? It's only a part of this, isn't it? So is there really the self Volkswagen Beetle? No. No. So is my hair the real Sister Jessie? No. If the hair of the real Sister Jessie, then why would it keep growing? But whereas the other parts don't keep growing? Why? So why does this hair grow, become white, whereas the other part don't become white? Why do the hair drop when ones get older? But why does this body don't drop yet? So these are all the conditions that come together that make this thing, we call it a car. Any one of these conditions are missing, just like remember the farmer and the seed. Any one of those factors is missing. It doesn't create this car. It doesn't bring out a tree. So this is the teaching. The three main core teachings is impermanence. All conditions, dukkha. And there is no true self because they are all conditions. If any one of these is missing, you won't be here. I won't be here. The Volkswagen won't be a Volkswagen Beetle. Yeah, but these three concepts are actually very difficult concepts to really grasp on. But you need to start understanding it more and more by your own experience. You can easily understand that through your meditation experience, because when you meditate, you feel changing all the time, right? One day there will be a wonderful meditation, an hour just go by like a flick of moment. One day, like, oh gosh, 10 hours gone by, the bell hasn't rung, right? That's impermanent. Why? Because one day your mind is very focused, calm, peaceful. There's no dukkha there. The other day there's a lot of dukkha, pain, or wandering thoughts, crazy, or drowsiness, whatever. Why? Why would that happen? Because things arises, or maybe things you have dealt with, and then you came in and you sit down and all these crazy thoughts coming because of what happened just now. All conditions. So these are very difficult concepts to really see through the truth, and not just see through, but remember to constantly remember throughout your life is not easy. Okay, so it's very heavy. This tonight talk is actually a lot of things in there. So you need to go back and refresh yourself over and over again on these topics and look at these 3 verses over and over again. So reflections for next time is, have you experienced impermanence in your life? Of course you have, right? But how did it affect you? And also, did that experience teach you anything about life? Have you progressed? Have you benefited from it? So remember, impermanence can catch you off guard just like that. And that is why it is impermanent, right? Unexpected, ever-changing, and no control. And the first thing that we always have to see through is impermanence, dukkha and impermanence, before we can actually start to go into seeing non-self. Don't jump into non-self. See through this dukkha and impermanence first. Okay? I know you have a lot to deal with tonight, so I will see you next month. So let us dedicate our merits. May these blessings extend to all, that we, with all the other living beings, together will attain the Buddha way. May we wish more and more people will encounter the wise words of the Buddha, study them, understand them, and put them into practice, and help themselves to disentangle from all the attachments, from all the sufferings, and from all the dukkha, and liberate themselves and be ultimately free, happy, and peaceful.